We often think of history as this sweeping, almost mechanical process, the grand narrative of empires rising and falling, or the inevitable march of time.
Hmm.
What happens when that massive, decades-long cosmic conspiracy, the war against the Daleks, which stretches across galaxies, collides violently, suddenly, with one single, intensely personal family drama?
That collision, that messy, intimate point where the cosmic and the domestic meet, that's really the core tension we're wading into today.
It is.
And this deep dive is built from a really dense stack of sources detailing a conflict rooted in a location you'd just never expect.
Not at all.
A sleepy, unassuming English village called Little Caldwell, set in the damp political anxiety of 1983.
And within the small, very wet corner of Berkshire, we find almost every staple of time travel lore, but it's all filtered through this immense emotional weight. We have a daughter's frantic search for a father she believed was dead.
Yeah.
We have a whole sophisticated alien refugee sanctuary disguised as a coffee shop, a stolen time machine, and ultimately a high-stakes threat involving enough tactical nuclear firepower to scorch the entire English countryside.
Specifically around the famous Greenham Common base.
Exactly.
So our mission here is crucial. We have to, cut through all the noise, the alien technology, the temporal displacement, and really try to understand the core motivations driving everyone involved.
The why.
The why, precisely. We have to unpack exactly how the renowned archaeologist, Bernice Summerfield Benny, as we know her, finally tracked down her missing father, Isaac.
And what his clandestine operation truly entailed over 20 years.
And the excruciating personal and political confrontation that followed. It's a lot.
And what immediately jumps out in this material is that powerful sense of emotional contrast. It sets Benny's frantic, desperate search against the philosophical weariness of the doctor, who is clearly trying to keep a low profile.
Very low.
And the immediate, stark, very human danger faced by the residents of Little Caldwell. It feels personal, but the stakes are genuinely planetary.
It is the perfect convergence of the mundane and the cosmic.
Yeah.
Isaac Summerfield chose a location so uninteresting, so focused on human misdirection and invisibility, that the sheer presence of the doctor and his daughter, it acts like a wrecking ball. A wrecking ball on a delicate, highly effective 20-year operation. The moment they arrive, everything Isaac built just begins to crack under the pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The emotional anger that begins this entire deep dive, the Sci-Fi incident.
Right.
This isn't just a lost ship, it's a scar on Benny's soul. Benny, as we know, has carried this idealized, almost mythic memory of her father, Isaac Summerfield, ever since he vanished years ago.
Decades.
For decades, she's consoled herself with the fantasy that he was doing the most dramatic thing imaginable, fighting a top-secret war against the Daleks.
And that fantasy, that pure idealization of her absent hero, it's immediately and brutally challenged by the hard facts she unearths. The critical piece of evidence that Benny finally gets her hands on comes from an Admiral Groenewegen, an officer who had strongly protested the official, sanitized report of Isaac's disappearance.
So he never bought the official story?
Never. Groenewegen's argument was crucial. He insisted Isaac was no coward and that the flight recorder data was, misinterpreted.
So Benny, clutching this shred of hope, manages to view the flight recorder hologram. And this is a moment of real personal agony and doubt for her.
It must have been.
The recording shows the final moments of a devastating battle. 3 massive orange vessels, which the sources identify as Dalek planet rippers, being fought by 6 small blue ships, one of which is her father's vessel, the Tisiphone.
And this compressed, repeating loop of combat is where Benny's idealization just threatens to shatter.
It really does.
She watches the tiny blue outline of the Tisiphone veer suddenly, turn around, and seem to accelerate out of the battle, vanishing from the hologram's field of reference.
So from this compressed data, the conclusion looks
damning. It looks damning. She initially feared the worst, that he had abandoned his crew and ran away. She even whispers this heartbreaking question. What were you doing, Daddy?
That fear of cowardice, the idea that her hero failed, must have been overwhelming. But this is where the deeper truth lies, because we know the Doctor and Benny don't just stop at a recording.
Precisely. They travel back in time to the very moment that Tisiphone vanished, thanks to the Doctor's specific expertise in temporal mechanics.
And what do they see?
They witness Isaac's true, desperate action. He wasn't retreating at all. He was employing a brilliant, extremely risky tactical maneuver.
Okay.
He was instructing his crew to use nearby planetary radiation and gravity, specifically a gravitational slingshot effect, to speed up for a surprise high-G counterattack on the Daleks.
So he hadn't been running away at all. He was performing a dangerous sacrificial strike that required him to temporarily move out of the visual combat range.
Yeah, exactly. Groenewegen initial assessment that Isaac was a strategic genius, not a coward, is confirmed in that moment of pure, high-octane action and brilliant military calculation.
He was a hero.
He was a hero, yes, but a very specific, pragmatic kind of hero, one who uses physics and calculated risk instead of just brute force.
But then something goes wrong.
Something always goes wrong. Before the counterattack can be launched, fate intervenes. The sources describe the ship being engulfed by a massive, colorful time rip.
A wormhole.
A localized, powerful wormhole during this high-speed maneuver. It tears the ship and Isaac's escape pod out of the battle and out of their normal timeline entirely. That's the true moment of disappearance.
And following the faint transponder signal that leaked through that wormhole is what finally leads the TARDIS to its destination.
Little Caldwell, Berkshire, Earth, 1983.
But the timing is way off.
Massively off. The temple tangent was huge. Isaac didn't arrive in 1983. He arrived 2 decades earlier in 1963. He survived the destruction of the Tisiphone, which he sent into the sun to prevent Dalek recovery. And he crash-landed in an escape pod in the Welsh countryside before, establishing himself.
And he even makes a comment about it.
He does. He notes with some historical irony that he arrived just in time for Kennedy's assassination.
This temporal gap, that 20-year silence, it just makes the reunion absolutely devastating for Benny. She finds her lifelong missing hero, not in a crisp military uniform ready for a secret war, but
running a quirky independent coffee shop and bookshop called The Pyramid?
The sources convey the crushing mundanity of the discovery. He's wearing faded jeans and a black cardigan, washing up coffee pots behind the counter.
He has aged. He has gray hair. He is settled.
It is the grief of the discovery. That's the word the source material uses. That shock of finding him older, established, having already lived an entire second mundane life for 2 decades, a life she entirely missed.
And he's asking her these logistical questions about her husband, Jason, and her job, while she's still reeling from the cosmic implications that he survived and simply opened a shop.
Right. She's meeting a man who has already processed his own survival and just moved on.
It's the betrayal of the ideal. She even finds herself having that classic moment of science fiction denial.
Well, what does she say?
She whispers to the doctor, "How do we know he isn't a robot replica or a sloth or something?" It's psychologically easier to believe he's a disguised alien operative than to accept the reality.
That the hero she idealized chose stability and the mundane over the eternal war.
He chose life over the constant battlefield.
And that choice of life brings us directly to our next section, because that coffee shop, The Pyramid, is the front for an utterly fascinating operation. Well, let's talk about that operation in Little Caldwell, the architecture of clandestine operations.
Right. This speaks volumes about Isaac's deep, almost clinical understanding of human behavior and paranoia.
How so?
He built Little Caldwell as a specific type of safe haven, characterized by its utter blandness. He explicitly sought out a place that was barely a village, deliberately uninteresting, precisely to deflect attention. His core belief, the foundation of his survival strategy, is in misdirection.
And he doubled down on that misdirection. Yeah. For good measure, where does he locate his alien sanctuary?
Right next door to the massive, highly publicized USAF base at Greenham Common.
Which in 1983 was already a hotbed of political activism and media scrutiny.
Exactly. If anyone is looking for strange lights, alien ships, or secret operations, they'll be looking at the military base, not the coffee shop where they serve oat cakes and mediocre filter coffee.
It's a genius stroke of psychological warfare against human intelligence. He's hiding in plain sight by using the biggest target nearby as a shield.
And underpinning the entire 2-decade operation is a very clear, strict, philosophical rule. One that becomes absolutely critical later on when it's tested by violence.
And what's that rule?
No alien technology inside the perimeter. No blasters, no monitors, no advanced weapons.
And his reasoning is beautifully idealistic.
It is.
Because anyone with a gun is a bad guy.
Exactly. It sets up this crucial moral high ground. Isaac's sanctuary is founded on nonviolence and rehabilitation, contrasting starkly with the militaristic, confrontational approach Benny and the Doctor usually embodies.
So who is in his crew?
His crew is a mix of displaced humans and aliens, all living under assumed identities. We meet Tony the Sun, who maintains a perfect human disguise using a subtle hologram generator.
Okay.
There's Joel, the young time-displaced fanboy from 1993, who works the register and makes sure they keep up to date with pop culture references they can use as cover.
Smart.
And others, crucially including Albinex and Navarino.
The recruitment strategy itself is also something worth exploring in depth. How does Isaac manage this constant flow of refugees without raising alarm?
He leverages existing human fringe culture. He runs the bookshop element of the pyramid, specializing in paranormal text titles like Western mysticism and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
So he's targeting a specific kind of person.
He recruits from those who already seek the weird, the ones the rest of society dismisses as conspiracy theorists. He turns UFO spotters and local eccentrics into reliable contacts.
On what principle?
Know thine enemy. Or better still, recruit them.
He's using the existing paranoia of 1980s Britain, the fascination with Area 51 and flying saucers, as a natural defense system. He's taking the crazy ones and giving them a purpose.
Exactly. And in the middle of all this domesticity and elaborate cover, Isaac and Benny engage in a deep, agonizing philosophical debate, particularly concerning the Doctor.
Ah, this part is fascinating.
Isaac doesn't just see the Time Lord as a savior. He sees him through the eyes of the collateral damage. He points out the human toll of the Doctor's constant involvement in temporal meddling.
He has sheltered hundreds of survivors over the 20 years, refugees who were left behind, suffering from nightmares and PTSD years later.
He even mentions a specific name, a man named Adam Colby, who is still having nightmares 7 years later after an incident the Doctor was involved in.
So Isaac's argument is that the Doctor's interventions, while heroic, cause unacceptable collateral damage because he never stays to clean up the mess.
This is a huge accusation leveled at the Doctor, that he is a force of nature in an oncoming storm that saves the planet but breaks the people he touches. Isaac has spent 2 decades dealing with the refugees who couldn't cope with the Time Lord's absence.
But Benny, who has spent her life following the Doctor's wake, she defends the necessity of his actions, even while she's reeling from her father's secrets and his 2 decades of deception.
Yeah.
Despite the 20-year gap and the immediate conflict over methods, there's still that deep, unspoken emotional bond between father and daughter.
That bond surfaces in a perfect small anecdote. They finish a quote together, a saying Isaac used when Benny was a child.
What's the quote?
They recite it in unison. We dance around in a ring and suppose,
Yeah.
but the secret sits in the middle and knows.
It's an acknowledgement that despite everything, they're family, connected by private history, even if Isaac has been hiding a monumental secret.
But, as you rightly pointed out earlier, the Doctor's presence is a wrecking ball. This fragile balance is immediately shattered the moment the TARDIS materializes.
Absolutely. His arrival acts as a catalyst, triggering the inevitable disruption Isaac spent 20 years preventing.
Aya Jarrus, a Lacayan refugee, goes missing immediately, and not kidnapped by the enemy, but terrified of the Doctor himself.
So the refugees already know his reputation.
Oh, they do. They call him the oncoming storm.
Yeah.
And their terror is instantaneous and reflexive, which just proves Isaac's point about the destructive nature of the Doctor's fame.
And then the ultimate insult to a Time Lord.
The TARDIS is stolen.
At the same time, the external threat that Isaac was trying so hard to manage finally closes in. We are introduced to Ellen Woodworth, a critical antagonist in the source material.
And she's an agent for C-19.
Oh.
We should probably clarify what C-19 is for, for anyone not familiar.
Please do. We can't just assume everyone knows the deep-cut acronyms.
Right, so C-19, in this specific context, functions as a highly xenophobic, deeply paranoid British intelligence unit. It's dedicated entirely to tracking, neutralizing, and often experimenting upon non-human entities found on Earth.
They are the domestic threat.
We are the domestic threat, fueled by fear and nationalistic protectionism.
And Woodworth is the perfect embodiment of that ideology. The sources stress that she is driven by intense xenophobia and a fervent belief in protecting Britain first.
She views all aliens as enemies who lack basic human dignity. She explicitly states there is no Amnesty International for you, no human rights.
Wow.
She is tracking Little Caldwell, viewing Isaac's operation not as a sanctuary but as a hostile infiltration point, and she is ready to organize a raid. She is the perfect opposite of Isaac's compassionate, nonviolent mission.
So we have the internal crisis, the TARDIS stolen, and a refugee panicked, and the external crisis C-19 closing in.
Yes.
This is where the mystery deepens and crosses over into the surprisingly tragic supernatural, the ghost of Caroline Gray. The disappearances are tied to this local lore about a gray lady appearing near an ancient shattered cottage on the Common.
The sources established that the disappearances, which now include the Doctor's companion, Chris Quedge, and the TARDIS, are connected to this spectral figure. The Doctor, of course, decides to investigate using his usual eccentric approach.
Which involves a ghost detector he built, described in the sources as a masterpiece of improvisation.
That's made up.
Gaffer tape, a tea strainer, some wire, and a very serious dowsing rod.
Of course it is.
And he uses this device to identify the ghost as Caroline Gray, a first-year archaeology student who was trapped in time by remnants of a Eucalian time travel device.
And we should pause on that. Eucalian devices were notoriously unstable temporal accelerators.
Right.
So Caroline was caught in the residual field of one of these catastrophic failures, and now she exists only a fraction of a second out of phase with our reality. She is desperately trying to communicate, but she is fundamentally lost.
It's a tragic subplot. It highlights the horrifying and non-dramatic consequences of time technology going wrong. She's not haunting anyone, she's just stuck.
And the Doctor observes the tragic technical state of her existence. Her temporal essence is spread so thin that there was finally nothing left.
So she's fading.
She has lost her name and her memory, essentially being stripped of her identity by the temporal feedback. This provides this poignant, devastating counterpoint to the Doctor's own mastery of time and identity. She is everything the Doctor fears becoming, an accidental, forgotten consequence of temporal experimentation.
And while the Doctor is chasing ghosts, the complex conspiracy Isaac feared thickens significantly. The crisis is not purely external, it is fueled by a collaborator from within Isaac's own crew.
Yes, Albinex, the Navarino, who helped Isaac establish the operation 2 decades earlier.
The traitor.
He's the traitor. He's the one who stole the TARDIS and kidnapped Chris Quedge, exploiting Isaac's trust and his operation's philosophical vulnerability.
And Chris is immediately subjected to a brutal interrogation. It's important to clarify who is doing the interrogating.
They are Caxterid agents, working for Albinex. The Caxterids are known for their efficiency and ruthlessness. They function as mercenaries, specializing in data extraction.
So they're not interested in Chris himself?
Not at all. They are solely focused on what he knows about the Doctor, specifically seeking information related to global warfare. They make explicit demands regarding access to top-secret information about nuclear weaponry codes.
So the nuclear threat isn't theoretical, it's the immediate, confirmed objective of the enemy.
Right. This confirms that Albinex isn't just trying to go home, he's trying to leverage planetary destruction for personal gain.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the rescue plan relies on the most absurd, improbable ally imaginable.
It does. The discovery of Chris's location, a storage unit near the military base where Albinex has stashed the TARDIS and his own small ship, is thanks to a vital intelligence asset named Graham.
Graham the spatula. This deserves serious time and consideration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Graham is a mundane white plastic spatula, but the key detail is that he contains just a shred of Lawton matter.
A tiny fragment of the highly advanced, terrifying plastic life form.
Right. Because of this, Graham has a peculiar rapport with Tony the Sun, who is able to read the Autumn's almost instinctive awareness of technology and location.
So this Autumn fragment spatula and object Isaac would have normally kept outside the perimeter for containing alien technology stows away unnoticed in Agent Woodworth's bag during her scouting mission of the coffee shop.
It's perfect. Woodworth, in her extreme xenophobia, is entirely oblivious that she has picked up the single most efficient non-human spy in the entire operation.
So Graham is able to signal the military base location to Tony.
Yes. It is the definition of an indispensable non-human asset, succeeding exactly because it looks so ordinary.
I just love that detail. Isaac, a man obsessed with misdirection and non-tech solutions, is saved by a fragment of sentient plastic disguised as a kitchen utensil. It proves that sometimes the most mundane items can possess the most extraordinary capabilities.
Especially if they have that crucial shred of Autumn matter. It also gives us a crucial point of lighthearted absurdity before the inevitable serious confrontation.
It does.
So this discovery propels the team, the Doctor, Benny, Isaac, and the core crew, into action. They launch a rescue, driving Albinex's psychedelic van, which Joel, the time-displaced fanboy, refers to as a relic of the 70s.
And crucially, they intentionally adhere to Isaac's nonviolence principles and go without weapons.
Yes.
They are driving an easily recognizable van toward a highly armed military installation, deliberately putting themselves at a tactical disadvantage to define their moral stance against the brutality of Woodworth's C-19 operation.
And once they infiltrate the base, they quickly confirm the absolute cruelty of the military complex. Tony finds Ia Jerish, the Lakailan refugee who disappeared,
And
and the 2 Caxtrids who had been working for Albinex, dead in the morgue.
wait, Woodworth killed the Caxtrids too, her own potential assets.
Yes. The sources confirm Woodworth viewed all aliens as threats, collaborators or not. This concerns that her operation prioritized immediate neutralization and dissection over dialogue or strategic intelligence, a horrifying manifestation of her xenophobia.
So the doctor's rescue of Chris forces a direct confrontation with Woodworth. She's visibly embarrassed, baffled by the sudden appearance of the doctor on her territory.
And the doctor uses that confrontation to turn the tables, reminding her that he was held captive there back in 1968. He confronts her, railing against the helplessness he felt then and the cold, institutionalized ruthlessness she demonstrates now. He is confronting his own past vulnerability.
The terrifying atmosphere of the base forces, significant emotional development for his companions as well. Chris and Roz, amid the terror, confront their underlying undeclared feelings, what the source describes as their puppy crush and mutual attraction.
Yes, they share this raw, panicked kiss, forcing them to acknowledge the risks and the vulnerability their relationship carries. Roz, the typically cynical, emotionally guarded adjudicator, realizes she needs Chris, despite the incredible danger that surrounds them both.
This entire section is a deep dive into the cost of involvement. Isaac realizes his principle of nonviolence has limits when confronted with murder. The doctor faces his own past, and Chris and Roz step into the vulnerability of human connection in the face of death.
Yeah.
But that personal peril is about to explode into global peril.
Let's transition now to the main event, the nuclear threat and the final twist. The stakes jump from internal espionage and personal betrayal to global catastrophe involving the Greenham Common missile silos.
Albinex, the Navarino trader, has one more card to play. He's successfully kidnapped Ace Dorothy, who is now 18, meaning she is displaced from her own timeline, making her highly vulnerable.
Right, and he demands nuclear destructor codes from the doctor, planning to hold the entire USAF base at Greenham Common hostage.
What's his motive here? It's not just chaos.
No, Albinex's motive, unlike Woodworth's, is strategic. He intends to use this hostage situation and the threat of nuclear detonation to gather the technology and power he needs to return safely home to Navarro.
So he sees Earth as merely a stepping stone and a resource.
Entirely. And his method of torture is incredibly specific and cruel. He attempts to extract the codes by psychically linking the doctor to Caroline Gray, the ghost.
The goal being to force the doctor to relive past pain and agony, using the ghost as a conduit for suffering.
This is a brilliant strategic move because it weaponizes the doctor's compassion. Albinex is leveraging the fragility of Caroline Gray's temporal state. He forces the doctor to endure psychic agony, and for a moment, the doctor resists.
What does he say?
He notes his incredible age and resilience. There's nothing an embryonic upstart like you can show me which I haven't seen before. He is old, weary, but seemingly unbreakable.
However, the cost is borne by the ghost.
Always. Caroline Gray, existing a fraction of a second out of phase, is overwhelmed. The sheer intensity of the Time Lord's cosmic suffering is too much for her already fragile temporal state. She's literally unable to sustain that level of pain without dissipating entirely.
So seeing the ghost begin to shatter, Albinex changes tactic.
Yes, he'd seen the doctor flinch and briefly enter a state of blankness during the extreme pain. He uses the ghost's residual link to access a memory of the doctor's tied to the codes. Something seemingly innocuous but specific.
A nice cup of tea.
Exactly. He uses compassion, or the ghost's inability to withstand cosmic agony, as the ultimate weakness to force the doctor's hand.
This is the moment where the personal betrayals truly peak. The conspiracy unravels entirely, starting with Isaac's ultimate terrible deception aimed at his own daughter.
Right. Isaac confesses to Benny his deep, long-standing lie. He admits he lured the doctor to Little Caldwell by intentionally switching on the transponder signal from the Tasiphon.
The very signal Benny followed for decades.
Yes. His plan wasn't just survival. It was a 20-year-long effort to gather an army of aliens to defend Earth against the Daleks, who he believes pose an inevitable existential threat to this sector of space. The doctor was ultimately the bait to draw in the larger conflict he needed to prepare for.
Wait, so the hero Benny idolized wasn't just avoiding the war, he was using his own daughter's desperate 20-year search as bait. That moves him from mundane survivor to cold manipulator, doesn't it? The sheer depth of that strategic cruelty must have been crippling for Benny.
It was devastating. The sources describe her reaction as profound pain, linking it directly to her history. She hits back with her own painful past, sharing the betrayal of her first lover, Simon Kyle.
What happened with him?
He traded their shared secrets at the Academy for leniency after being caught stealing artifacts. She explains to Isaac precisely why she struggles so intensely with trust and why his deception hits her so hard.
She says something crushing, doesn't she?
She does. She says, "I expect the men I love to betray me."
This moment is the true emotional climax. She is not just angry at the plot, she is confirming a lifelong pattern of pain that started with his own disappearance.
And amidst this personal breakdown, the doctor, having just endured psychological torture, calmly reveals his ultimate counterploy to Isaac.
Okay.
He willingly gave Albinex the nuclear codes, yes, but he adds the crucial caveat. They are a decade out of date.
So they're useless.
Useless. Albinex's plan relies on accessing current nuclear capacity, but the doctor has already limited the damage by providing useless information.
But Albinex doesn't know this, and believing he has successfully blackmailed the Time Lord, he initiates the missile launch at Greenham Common. This is the ultimate test of Isaac's philosophy and the final decision point of the deep dive.
Isaac, forced to choose between his nonviolent principles and the clear imminent danger of global war. Even if the codes are defunct, the launch itself is a crisis. He receives the doctor's silent, almost regretful approval and chooses action. He redirects the nuclear missile.
And this is not a gentle stop. Instead of stopping the launch, he uses the missile as a weapon of mass destruction aimed at a specific target.
He uses the missile to destroy a previously unknown but clearly recognized Dalek spy satellite hovering over the military base.
So that's the real threat.
That's the real threat. This single act confirms his commitment to the true, larger, underlying war against the Daleks, proving that for him, the safety of Earth overrides his 2 decades of philosophical purity.
But this commitment comes at a tangible, personal cost for the operation.
The sacrifice of Gran the spatula. In a fit of frustrated rage right before the doctor intervenes, Albinex slices the spatula in half, destroying the crucial Auton intelligence asset.
So the missile is launched.
The immediate threat of Albinex is defeated, telepathically stunned by Mrs. Randriana Solo in a final, surprisingly powerful maneuver, and the Dalek satellite is destroyed by a nuclear warhead.
Isaac uses the ultimate violence nuclear force to protect the planet from a worse existential threat. It confirms that his philosophy is flexible and ultimately aligned with the doctor's own necessary utilitarian streak.
The end justifies the means when the stakes are planetary.
With the crisis averted, we move into the aftermath and the process of wrapping up loose ends. The operation in Little Caldwell is clearly and irreparably compromised.
Yes. Isaac, having been forced to choose between his decades-long ambition and his conscience, finally gives up. He decommissions his anti-Dalek army.
And the fallout extends immediately to his crew, those who shared his idealism. Mrs. Randriana Solo, one of the key members of the Sanctuary, chooses to leave.
Where does she go?
She decides to join the Greenham Peace Camp just outside the base.
This is a significant ideological split. She states she can no longer trust Isaac's methods after his deception and his final violent compromise, using a nuclear missile.
She prioritizes practice in nonviolence and ethical purity over Isaac's necessary evils. She chooses a path of idealistic protest over strategic warfare.
And what about Joel, the fanboy?
Meanwhile, Joel, the displaced fanboy from 1993, makes a very pragmatic, life-altering choice. He decides to remain with Isaac's operation in 1983.
He has found his purpose, his mission in the past, but he also ensures his own future is protected. He records a video message addressed to C-19 to be delivered in 1993, explaining his disappearance in a way that minimizes suspicion and protects his timeline. He chooses to anchor himself in his new reality.
And the Doctor, meanwhile, completes his final act of compassion.
Going back to Caroline Gray.
He saves the ghost.
Yes. He finally takes the remnants of the Eucalian device from her, the mechanism that had anchored her fragmented existence. He gives her release, allowing her to dissipate entirely.
Recognizing that she was only making herself sicker by being tethered to this reality.
He says gently, "You don't have to do this," granting her the peace she could not achieve herself.
And in a final, quiet, and extremely important moment, the Doctor and Isaac share a debate over their opposing philosophies of control and intervention.
Isaac argues vehemently that his 20-year plan was necessary to save more lives than were lost. The utilitarian argument.
Hmm.
The Doctor, having just sacrificed an entire operation to save a few, counters with a profound statement about humility and hubris. He tells Isaac that it takes even more courage to realize that you've made a mistake.
Despite their profound philosophical differences, despite Isaac's deep betrayal of his daughter, they shake hands. It's an acknowledgement of grudging respect.
The Doctor concedes that sometimes, even if disastrously executed, Isaac's protective instinct was sound, acknowledging that they work well together under pressure.
So what's the resolution for Benny and Isaac?
The resolution for them is highly symbolic and relates directly to the beginning of the deep dive. Isaac, in attempting to escape his past and the memory of the Tsuphon incident, found a new 20-year purpose in protecting Earth. But it was only by confronting his daughter, admitting his deception, and finally giving up his impossible ambition that he finds true peace and reconciliation with his identity.
And Benny. She finally comes to terms with the complex legacy of her father and her own identity, shifting her focus entirely. The sources reference a crucial philosophical story, the hermit and his name.
We need to unpack that parable for the listener.
Please.
The philosophical story is about a hermit who repeatedly changes his name, believing that self-knowledge requires the shedding of external labels. Only when he finally stops relying on inherited or chosen names does he find true identity.
And that parable symbolizes Benny's journey perfectly. She started by putting her husband's name in front of her father's name when she married Jason.
Right.
But the true resolution is her earning the right to put Doctor in front of your own. She's forged her identity not from her father's heroic ideal nor from her husband's legacy, but through her own actions, her own hard-won professional title, and self-knowledge.
She is Bernie Summerfield, Doctor of Archaeology, defined by herself. That's the core takeaway. The deep dive shows that the most dangerous conspiracy was not the heavily armed military base run by xenophobes, but the decades-long attempt to draft an alien army against the Daleks, orchestrated quietly from a small English coffee shop.
The greatest, most destabilizing threat was Isaac's well-intentioned but ultimately compromised ambition, not Woodworth's immediate xenophobia. The intensely personal drama drove the cosmic conflict, not the other way around.
Which raises an important question that lingers long after this deep dive is over.
And what's that?
We saw the Doctor, the one person dedicated to preserving the timeline and avoiding interference, give away nuclear codes, albeit outdated ones, to Albinex purely to save a single lost life.
The life of Caroline Gray, the ghost, who was literally existing a fraction of a second out of sync.
So if the person dedicated to preserving the timeline is willing to compromise planetary safety, even slightly, for individual compassion, for the rescue of someone who is essentially already gone, what does that imply about the inherent value of every single life, even the misplaced or forgotten?
Where does the line between individual rescue and global responsibility truly lie for the great interveners of the universe?
A life is a life, regardless of its place in the grand narrative of time. A truly profound thought to carry with you as you process the cost of heroism.
Indeed. Until the next deep dive, keep digging for the truth.